Hello, this is Antichrist 9:1672. Um, I've been watching a number of videos on YouTube about homosexuality in the church, and it's been an issue that's been on my mind for quite some time. The topic of this video will be homosexuality, the church, and race. Recently, I had been talking to a Jehovah's Witness, and I've really been pressing them on the question of homosexuality in the church. And it came to my attention through having these conversations with him that the church can never truly accept the homosexual lifestyle. Um, and now I have a better understanding of why that is. I mean, for a lot of Christians, of course, it will probably be rather obvious. Um, if an individual is a homosexual or had been on one in the past, or or, or whatever, and they came to the church and they were like, look, I want to be a member of your church. There's one thing that they would have to be willing to do, and that's to make at least a sincere attempt to turn away from homosexuality. That's not to say that the individual wouldn't backslide or that it wouldn't be a struggle, but as long as that they were making an honest attempt, I imagine that probably most churches in America would accept them. But that's not really the issue today, it seems. It seems that there are a lot of homosexuals that are out there that are saying, if I'm born this way, then basically the church should accept me. Well, the major problem is that the church doesn't agree that you're born that way, and that the church is not willing to accept homosexuals if it means accepting the homosexual lifestyle as well. And it's kind of understandable from their point of view. I mean, they're not going to accept fornication or adultery either. Even though a person may struggle with it, but if they said, look, this is me, this is who I am, I'm an adulterer, I'm a fornicator, or even a pedophile, they're not going to, you can't just go in there and say, this is who I am, and accept me and, my behavior, because those behaviors are considered by the church to be a sin. But the issue to me, at least on what's going on in America, is a lot more complicated than just that. Now I want to look at the issue of the state and gay rights, in particular gay marriage. To me, there are a lot of African Americans that are angry that the gay movement is, or gay rights is being equated with the struggles of African Americans. Um, and I think a lot of them, for lack of a better word, do tend to be a little ignorant. And it's not necessarily their own fault. When in America, when we hear someone mention civil rights, I don't care who you are, automatically what comes to mind is blacks or African Americans. Something, they're, if you're not African American, they're trying to get something, they want more, or here we go with that black shit again. And so civil rights has been equated with a black issue. And when you look at the struggle of African Americans in America, most of the civil rights gains do seem to have come with our involvement. There were, of course, without having to go into details, massive loss of life and liberty went to gain those rights that weren't originally given to citizens. And there are so many people now who come to America and take those civil rights for granted. But we as African Americans have to realize that civil rights are basically citizens' rights. If you're a citizen, then you have a right to certain types of behavior. You have a right to certain types of facilities and an expectation from a democratic government. And what I've noticed in a lot of these states, there are some parallels. And some of these states that have considered gay marriage, some of them would pass these laws, and then they would take those in the opposition would say, well, we'll just have a referendum. We'll give it to the people, which basically a referendum is that, they'll let the citizens of a particular area vote on whether or not they believe that it should be legal. And even though this is definitely very democratic, it there is a problem if you're an African American. And I hope that, those of you that haven't considered this will think of this. Imagine if in American history slavery was put to referendum. A lot of us have been under the idea that the Civil War was fought for slavery, but it was only indirectly. There were lots of people that if slavery were put for a referendum, both in the North and South, who would have voted against it, especially if they would have been presented with the option of, on the one hand, saving the Union or ending slavery, but you couldn't have both. We would probably still be slaves. The same thing could be said for our civil rights struggle. I'm not even sure if it were put to a referendum today, whether or not we would have things like affirmative action, separate but equal, the end of Jim Crow, and lynching. So you're basically, when you prevent other groups, in particular homosexuals, from getting those rights, you're doing the same thing that racists did to our ancestors. And that's something that you really have to consider and take a long look at yourself. Is that the place you want to be in history? So I basically came to two considerations. On the one hand, the church, I do believe, has the right to require, that homosexuals, if they want to be a member of the church, that they have to, adhere to those principles. I don't understand why, homosexuals who, realize that there's something wrong, and they see that what's wrong is not in them, but with the church, and yet they would still want to be members. I mean, me personally, I'm not a homosexual, but I realize there's something wrong with the church. And realizing that there's something wrong, I no longer really wanted to be a member. Now, on the other side is that, citizens, as citizens, homosexuals should have the right to marry, to feel secure in their persons and employment, just like the rest of us. And in that way, there are definitely some parallels. And I would hope that a lot of us will kind of think about that. I mean, the last thing we'd want to do is to have the future look back on us as being no different than, Southern whites who wanted to defend the institution of slavery. And I think that's all I have to say on this issue. Please leave your comments, whether you agree or disagree, and just basically tell me what you think. And that's all for now.